Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV. I'm Jim Cardle. We're glad to be able to visit today with Congressman Lamar Smith out of San Antonio in the 21st Congressional District, also Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. Chairman Smith, thanks for joining us.
Jim, good to be with you as always. Appreciate you having me on.
We are going to cover just a couple subjects real quickly, if I can, Congressman. First of all, foremost on everybody's minds in an election year is jobs, and the economy. The White House has come out a week or two late with its proposed budget for the 2013 year. You probably have had just a little bit of time to look at it, but what's the initial read amongst the House members on the President's budget, if you will?
Well, actually the President's budget is a pretty easy read because we're seeing more of the same. We are seeing a proposal for more taxes, more spending, more debt on this country, and none of that should surprise us. Or I guess we are surprised because we would have thought by now the President would have realized his policies are not working. We've lost 2 million jobs since he became President. The deficit, which he said he was going to cut in half, he's actually doubled. Price of gasoline has almost doubled as well, gone up 80% since the day he was sworn in. So we were hoping for maybe a change of policies. We didn't see that. It's literally more of the same, more spending, more taxes, and obviously more debt on the American people, which is really a drag on the economy, and that prevents job creation. We have a situation too when it comes to the budget. This is incredible. For the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years, the Senate of the United States has failed to produce a budget. They've been in the hands of the Democrats, and the Democrats apparently don't feel they owe it to the American people to tell the American people how they're going to spend their money. I think that's a complete insult myself. And by the way, in the House, it wasn't until Republicans took control that we actually proposed and passed a budget. The last term under Speaker Pelosi, the Democrats failed to pass a budget in the House. And I don't know how they get away with that. To tell you the truth, the American people ought to demand that the Democrats in the Senate come up with a budget and tell us how their money is going to get spent.
So we've got almost 3 years of no budget thanks to the Democrat-controlled Senate. I did see, if you could comment on this President's budget, it's going to be a 4th year of record $1 trillion plus deficits.
That is true. Under this administration, we've had 3 straight years of over $1 trillion of deficit spending. Again, this is after he said he was going to cut the deficit in half. We're setting records every year. The 4th year is going to be over $1 trillion. According to this budget, he gets to below $1 trillion in a couple of years, but we've heard that story before, and somehow we never get there. We ought to be moving towards a balanced budget, not towards more debt.
Okay, one thing that you in the House have had direct responsibility or input on is the Stock Act.
Yes.
Allowing you members of Congress, or requiring, I should say, you members of Congress to have some transparency in your investment portfolios. It's a kind of a complex subject, but talk about that for a little bit, if you would.
This was a Stock Act, and I actually managed that bill on the House floor this week. And what we want to do is to reassure the American people that members of Congress and others are not going to use insider information that we gain because of our official position to try to make a profit in the stock market, either selling or buying stocks. For example, the stocks that I own are all managed by an independent company. I have no idea what stocks are being sold or bought.
One of the blind trusts we probably hear about.
It's very similar to that.
Okay.
So I have no control over how my stocks are bought or sold, but I'd recommend that, frankly, to other members of Congress. But what the House did with the Senate bill that was sent over to us is we amended it. So we include not only members of Congress in the prohibition against using inside information for stock dealing, we also include officials in the executive branch and judicial branch, not the judges, but everybody else, the higher level employees in the executive branch and judicial branch have to comply just like members of Congress and avoid using insider information to make a profit in the stock market. I think the American people are overwhelmingly supportive of that kind of bill. Well, in fact, it passed the House floor 417 to 2. I won't tell you who those two were, but they're on the wrong side of this particular issue in my view. But
well, usually we have our own Congressman Ron Paul that's voting against all the appropriations bills, but he was on the campaign trail.
Yeah, Ron was not one of those two. Maybe I don't know how he would have voted if he had been president, but I'm sure he would have supported the Stock Act. But anyway, we're taking steps like that to reassure the American people that we're not going to abuse our office.
Speaking of the administration and jumping to another subject, I know in the past you have been involved in, over the Christmas holidays, we had this this concept of the Obama administration naming a person to the new position of the Consumer Protection Agency, controversial Attorney General out of Ohio, and then also a couple members to the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board. Is there any new development there, or what's the latest on what Congress may or may not do related to this historical first?
There is a new development there, and the Judiciary Committee that I am chairman of is actually holding a hearing on that subject Wednesday. Let me give you a little bit of the historical background. We have a situation here where under our Constitution the President cannot make what are called non-recess appointments. If the Senate is in recess, then the President can make some of these appointments.
Because the Senate has ultimate authority to essentially stamp approval of the nominees.
Right. The Senate is supposed to have hearings on these nominees, on these appointees, and then confirm or not confirm. And in this case, the Senate was still in recess. Yes, they were not as active as they might be, but they were still working. There were still people showing up every day. So they never went in recess. Nevertheless, the President took it upon himself when most of the senators were out of town to make these 4 appointments. That is completely contrary to the precedent that we've had in this country. Some people say it breaks a precedent of 200 years because we don't know of anyone who's ever done it before. There was a temptation on the part of the last President Bush to make some of these kind of appointments, wait till most of the Senate was out of town, even if they were still in recess, and do it. And ironically enough, he was warned against doing that by Senator Reid, who is now the Senate Majority Leader. Senator Reid told President Bush, don't even think about making these kind of appointments.
Who has now helped facilitate the current president.
Right. And President Bush did not. And now we have Senator Reid, who was totally opposed to Bush making these kind of appointments, justifying President Obama making the exact same kinds of appointments and trying to, frankly, put people in these positions when the Senate is out of town and when he should not be making these kinds of appointees. So we don't know where it's going to end. As I say, I have a hearing on that subject in the Judiciary Committee. We're going to point out why we believe it's unconstitutional, certainly unprecedented in many ways. And once again, the President himself not practicing what he preaches, what he himself preached when he was in the Senate. And I think the American people are going to catch on to this President saying one thing and doing another, and the same thing for Senator Reid, who when President Bush was thinking about it, it was absolutely wrong. But when President Obama actually does it, it's somehow right. There's a contradiction there.
Speaking of practicing what one preaches, we have laws on the books. I want to jump to the border security and immigration issue real quick. Thank you again for coming in. We're visiting with House Judiciary Committee Chairman Lamar Smith, Congressman from San Antonio. A lot of folks don't realize, Congressman, the position you're in as chairman of that committee. It oversees a lot of the immigration and border security issues. And the issue of local officials fingerprinting and getting those fingerprints up into a federal database, and then the Justice Department either analyzing or not analyzing. There's been a lot of concern that illegal criminals or folks who are here illegally who have committed criminal acts are being turned back on the street. Comment real quickly as we wrap up on that.
Jim, a good couple of subjects there. One, this administration is too often releasing individuals who should be in jail, and they're releasing them back into our communities where many of them commit additional crimes. The second thing the administration is doing that is absolutely wrong in my judgment is that they have instructed their ICE officials to go through about 300,000 cases on a case-by-case basis. And these are individuals who should be sent home, and the administration is saying, well, you don't have to necessarily send them home. I call that backdoor amnesty, when they're going to allow individuals who are in the country illegally, who under our current laws should be what's called removed or sent home. And the administration now is just ignoring the laws on the books and coming up with their own interpretation and not necessarily sending individuals home who should be sent home. So
all through the Justice Department?
All through the Justice Department and Homeland Security Department as well. So this is an administration that somehow thinks, one, that they know better than the American people what's good for them, and two, if they don't like the laws, they can choose to enforce them selectively. That is not right in a democracy.
Well, Chairman Lamar Smith, Congressman from San Antonio, we're going to come back, I hope, on future visits, if you will grace us with your presence and talk about that border security issue. It's something of critical nature during this election year. Congressman Lamar Smith from San Antonio, thanks for joining us.
Jim.
Appreciate you coming in. Folks, remember to tune back for future editions of Insider TV because you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle. Thanks for joining us.